Well, as I said last video, the Tory leadership contest, and at least the speculation of who might run, who might not run, is already underway. Of course, we don't know at the time I'm doing this when, should we say, the first couple of proper events or when this event will truly kick off. I highly suspect it will be probably as early as next week when we start to hear the first lot of names be put forward for consideration for Tory MPs to start voting. And of course, that's how it's going to work. The first couple of rounds are always going to be, it is the Tory MPs that vote first until you get to the final two. And once you get to the final two, that is where the membership then of the Tory party then get involved and they have the chance to cast their vote. So that is how potentially this is going to work out. That is how sort of the Tory leadership contest is run. But already, we already know potentially people who will run. There is obviously Jeremy Hunt, who a couple of weeks ago already said that, yes, he intended to run and had set up a campaign group to help him run. Suella Braverman, the current Attorney General of the UK, has the day before, on Thursday, announced that she too was announcing her intention to run for PM. And Boris at that point hadn't even announced he'd gone yet. But one of the interesting things that was brought up yesterday, Steve Baker, of all people, has decided that he intends to run. And of course, a man like this as PM will do a lot of damage to the UK. He is probably a lot more hard right than even Boris Johnson was. Like I say, Boris Johnson was just a formidable group of clay, really. Unfortunately, Steve Baker is already a ready formed brick, and that brick is going to come down and fall firmly, squarely on the hard right libertarian wing of the Tory party. He could potentially have a lot of support if he does run, and if he does run, he might stand a very good chance of winning. Not only was he not in Boris Johnson's cabinet, so he can certainly avoid any of that line of questioning, but his hard right views on a lot of things, from the economy to his anti-green policies, will cause a lot of trouble for this country. So let's go finding more about his announcement, and will the speculation be, will he or won't he run? So we'll find out probably soon, very quickly, but let's go over this and find out how some of his wacky anti-green views could definitely do a lot of damage to the UK. So before we go into that, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. So over we go. This comes from The Guardian, with the title of Anti-Green MP Steve Baker considering running for PM. Steve Baker is considering running for Prime Minister. And if he won, he would dismantle many of Boris Johnson's green policies, the MP said. The MP for High Wycombe, who runs the European Research Group, which is credited for achieving a hard Brexit, has often hinted at his apathy towards green measures, once retweeting a report that claimed that the climate crisis is not happening. So bear that in mind. He is not just wanting to get rid of Boris Johnson's attempt to be green, the net zero stuff. He doesn't think climate change is happening at all. Anyway, he continues. He said many green measures, including paying farmers to help the environment, were, quote, anti-human life on Earth in the name of environmentalism. And he said that he would expand the protection of gas in this country because there is, quote, no short-term threat from the climate crisis. He said, I've got sufficient people imploring me to stand, so I've got to think about it seriously myself, he said. Entering the race is a likely event if Johnson is ousted. Other politicians are aghast at the idea that a climate crisis culture war could become part of any party leadership election. And, oh, almost certainly that is going to be part of the Tory leadership election. A lot of certainly the denial of the climate crisis and even the culture war will become part of the Tory leadership election. Mark my words, it certainly will. Anyway, it continues. The Green MP Caroline Lucas said, our climate cannot be a pawn in the Tory leadership psychodrama. She added that the Prime Minister, with Baker's views, would be a disaster of incurable proportions. Baker was speaking to The Guardian after an event at the Parliament hosted by the Global Warming Policy Foundation, a think tank that has been labelled one of the UK's leading sources of climate scepticism, and which Baker is a trustee. He said that he would end the push for more wind and solar power, explaining that they are fundamentally intermittent sources of energy. And therefore, if we are going to maintain our standard of living in a particular industry, we've got to cover those intermittent sources with something else. Instead, he would increase the country's use and domestic production of gas, though he conceded he would, quote, support carbon capture and storage. I think if the public found that they got discount gas on their energy bills because they accepted shale gas extraction near their homes, I think that that would be extremely popular with them, Baker said. And I'm sure once they find out what's happening to their water supply, that might turn around very, very quickly. But anyway, continues. He said a local Indian restaurant in his constituency was struggling with its energy bills, adding that it may have to close if prices do not go down, saying, if there's a price to our literal survival in the short run, people would understand. But the truth is, we are not any danger in the short run, he said. Measures to stop wildlife becoming extinct and to store carbon in the land would also be under threat if Baker became Prime Minister. He would run on a platform to reverse plans to pay farmers to conserve the environment rather than produce food, he said. What I want are policies that can feed us all, he said. That does include actually growing things that we do need in the UK. And I'm afraid that some of these policies which are being adopted are just anti-life. They're anti-human life on Earth in the name of environmentalism. I want us to live in the flourishing and the fullest lives of a healthy environment around us. The MP said, we are at risk from extreme green policies and accused the climate campaigners of terrifying children, saying, I regard this as child abuse. It's wrong. He does also not believe that the high emission scenarios presented by the Intermittent Panel on Climate Change, or the ICP, are likely to happen, saying that high emission scenarios are too often presented as a likely outcome, he said, adding, I used to manage risk as an aerospace engineer, and if a risk is catastrophic and frequent, you better do something about it now. But if a risk of catastrophic and is insufficiently likely, then you just don't do anything about it because it won't happen. His views do not match that of climate scientists, and a third of the ICCB report, which he which was complemented by hundreds of scientists over several years and signed off by most of the world's government, called on action now to avoid climate catastrophes. It warned that planetary warming of at least 1.5 centigrade was out of reach unless greenhouse gas emissions peak by 2025, and said the temperatures would soar to more than 3 Celsius with catastrophic consequences unless politicians and actions were urgently strengthened. So there's a lot of people, and they are right, going around saying that at the moment, okay, you got rid of Boris Johnson, but, and they are right, you could get someone entirely worse. I'd like you to meet Steve Baker, a potential runner. Of course, he hasn't announced that he's going to run yet. That may change. But for the fact that he's having, as he said there, a lot of people imploring him to run, he could win it. He is not a Boris Johnson cabinet member, so he's not got that stain on him. He is quite popular within the parliamentary party, so he's got the support there. But is he popular enough within the wider party to be able to win the run? It's possible. And unfortunately, if a guy like that got in, he would do even more damage than Boris Johnson. Trust me. And that's saying a lot. And Boris Johnson has done a lot of damage. He could do even worse. He could do even worse damage. That is for certain. But yeah, as always, like I say, when we hear as more Tory MPs start to join the race and we start to hear their comments, ultimately, this is where we might have to start going over to Conservative Home to hear what they are saying about this, which will be quite interesting indeed. But as always, like I say, do remember to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned to the chaos that is about to be unleashed of the Tory leadership contest. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button as well on your way out. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a motivation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there's YouTube subscription button, where you get all sorts of little bells and whistles when you subscribe to the channel that way. And of course, as always, thank you very much to everyone who does support the channel. And of course, we'll see you all next time.